And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. Hope you guys had a great weekend out there. Those of you who are affected by the storms this weekend, know our thoughts are with you and hope you and your family are safe. I know we've had our fair share of difficulties due to weather in our family recently, so I'm there with you guys, wishing you guys the best, and hopefully you guys come out the other end of it doing better than ever. But appreciate you guys joining us on a Monday evening. Thought we'd start just a little bit earlier than we had the last couple of times anyway. We'll try to do the same tomorrow night as well. Today we're going to discuss quite a bit. We're going to go over the buyer's market. We're going to see who's actually going to be a buyer, who's available for those teams to go after. We're going to get into some trade talk as well. What packages could look like, who might be available, top 30 prospects from other teams, all of those types of things. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Sub-Zero, appreciate you joining us already. It's been a while, man. Yankees started the season great. Now they suck. Need a reliever starter and third base to help them. They could use a corner infielder. I could see them going after a first baseman or a third baseman. They do need a reliever, and I thought all along, pretty much since the start of last year, that they needed to add not one, but two starters. They've certainly added at least one starter each of the last 2 years, but they still have a deficit right there. Now, they've gotten some great production out of what they've had, but it seems like it's run its course anyway over the last 20 games. I believe they're 5-15, something along those lines. Just hasn't been a good stretch of games. They're still among the leaders in the AL East. We'll dig into them here shortly. Sarah, Cardinals are most likely going to be buyers. Yes, I believe they are. Brewers are the team right now in that everybody's kind of saying they're the darling of the division. What a great start they've had, but they're playing with house money. I think they realize that. Their pitching staff leaves a lot to be desired. The acquisition of Savali certainly does help them out, but they still need some more starters there. I'm not really counting on those guys to be the most effective as we get into August and September pennant chase baseball. Their young lineup is still a young lineup. They could play with blinders on and just keep playing great, absolutely. But they still need more pitching, and we'll get into that here shortly as well. For the Cardinals, I believe they're going to be buyers right there with you, Sarah. As far as what they could look like, I would look at more of a starter first and foremost, and then see if I can tinker with maybe getting one more solid player. One thing, I think you guys know that I'm a Rangers fan anyway. We talked a little bit over the last couple weeks anyway about their up and down performance. How one week they look like they figured things out. The next week they lose 6 straight games, only to finally win their 7th game against the Baltimore Orioles on the road 11-2 and look like the old World Series team that we saw all last year. They are getting healthier, but one thing I wanted to touch on tonight is that they just had a 3-game sweep of the Tampa Bay Rays. They lost 2 of 3 in the series before that, though. They're still kind of up and down, but in general, their offense is starting to come around. Simeon's finally getting out of that season-long slump he's been in. I think he was up to like 7 for 75 up until the most recent stretch of games. Corey Seager absolutely crushed a ball tonight, 447 feet. He seems to be shaking off a little bit of the rust. Josh Young sounds like he's going to be evaluated towards the end of the week as to whether or not he'll come back. Rangers' best position player of the season has been Josh Smith. He was not on the American League All-Star team. He might be a replacement. Simeon did get named to the All-Star team, but like I said, he's been in a terrible slump up until very, very, very recently, and starting to show signs that he's coming out of it. John Gray had been knocked around a couple of starts now. Today, he looks absolutely great against the Angels. Of course, it's the Angels, so take it with a grain of salt. But they're a team that if they decide to sell, like Ken Rosenthal wrote this morning, they could have a plethora of pieces that could be available for these buyer teams. Burleson has been amazing this year and win too for the Cardinals. Yes, they have. But let's go ahead and dig into some of these buyers out there. Go ahead and flip over the standings first. and just see where this thing is at. Let me update the page just in case any other games have gone final. Only 7 games tonight on the MLB slate. We'll get into a little bit more about the Rangers as far as where they are at in the standings, because I think they're the team that probably tilts the scales here at the deadline more than anybody else. Whether they decide to buy and add a reliever, add a hitter, add a starter, whatever the case may be, or if they decide to sell and then they offload 4 starters, a couple relievers, and maybe 2 or 3 position players. The Rangers are certainly going to be one of the most active teams, whether they buy or sell. That's why I'm very curious to see how they wrap up this stretch of games before the All-Star break, and then how they come out of the All-Star break with those first couple of series after that. That's really going to tell the tale for their season. But looking at the standings right now, Orioles still on top in the AL East, followed by the Yankees. Red Sox are holding on to a wild card spot right now, 9 games above 500. Clearly better than I think anybody expected them to be. The Rays have been a little bit of a disappointment, even with their injury concerns and off-the-field problems that they have on their roster. Toronto Blue Jays, they've won 2 in a row. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They're 8 games under 500 still. They have a number of pieces that are attractive, we'll say, on the trade market as well. They aren't expected to be a team that's going to compete for the division. I would say it's a long shot that they compete for a wild card. I would say both the Rays and Jays are going to be sellers here at the deadline. But our buyers, clearly the Orioles and Yankees. I'd be surprised if the Red Sox decided to buy here at the deadline. The only way I see the Red Sox adding here at the deadline, if it's for a controllable starting pitcher, say somebody who's got 2 or 3 years left to control, low acquisition costs, something like that. Red Sox seem to be a lot more frugal than they ever have been in my history since I've been watching the team. And maybe now's the time where they can finally add a little bit around the periphery of this team and make themselves a little bit better and hold on to one of those wild card spots and see if they can get lucky, catch lightning in a bottle like the Diamondbacks did last year. AL Central, Guardians still out in front, 23 games up in the division. However, the Twins are certainly coming. They look very good right now. Only 5.5 games back. They also hold a wild card spot. As far as the Royals go, they certainly had a nice start to the year. They're 5-5 in their last 10. I would be surprised if the Royals hung on here and held on to a wild card spot, or at least competed for a wild card spot all the way through September. I think the pieces that they added here at this offseason on 1-year short-term type of deals really did help elevate them, raise the floor anyway. But this is still not a very good team when you look at what their future is going to be. They don't have a lot of talent coming. The talent that they do have on their roster is pretty much all free agents. All the people that they've tried to develop to some extent have not lived up to expectations. And this just seems a little bit more fool's gold than, say, a team like the Milwaukee Brewers, where those guys are all top prospects. All those guys are hitting, and they don't really have anything committed outside of, say, a guy like Yelich as far as money. So they're going to be a team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with in that NL Central for years to come. Meanwhile, in the Central, the Royals really were propped up this year by free agency. And I just told you that John Gray had been rocked in his previous 2 starts and looked good so far. Well, he just gave up a 2-run double. Or, excuse me, a 2-run triple to Mickey Moniak. He might be the first guy that gets sent to the bullpen. He looked good out of the bullpen last year in the postseason. Looked great in the World Series out of the bullpen. My goodness. It has not been a good row of games here for John Gray as a starter. He's just leaving too many pitches down the heart of the plate. Just not the same velocity on those pitches either. He needs to be out of that rotation. He might be the next one out of that rotation as they start to get healthier here before the deadline. Finishing up the AL Central, teams that are going to be sellers, of course, the Tigers and White Sox. White Sox have already, waved the white flag before the season even began. They don't really have a lot to sell. Crochet is the one piece that's really rumored out there. The Orioles are the team that's been most connected to him. Seems like a good fit, primarily because the Orioles and White Sox have scouted each other quite a bit. They were doing so for the Dylan Cease trade that ultimately did not happen. I'm curious to see if they come together here on a Garrett Crochet trade. The other piece the White Sox have is Luis Robert. I would be surprised if he went anywhere else besides the Philadelphia Phillies. They seem to have the wherewithal to take on the money and be willing to give up the prospects. We're talking about Dave Dombrowski. He's going to do everything he can to win. AL West, this is the most interesting division as far as the division winner, I guess. I don't think anybody is going to come out of this division as a wild card team. But looking at the top of this division, Mariners certainly have been the best team in this division so far this year, primarily because of that starting rotation. Their lineup has been absolutely atrocious. Their free agent acquisition of Mitch Garver, while he has some power, is hitting under 200 right now, and it just doesn't look good. I mentioned John Gray was looked like he was doing better. Well, he just gave up a RBI single to probably the worst hitter over the last 2 months in Joe Adell. By the way, the other worst hitter, the second worst hitter over the last 2 months, Adolis Garcia, your ALCS MVP. He collided with Marcus Semien, and both of those guys, since colliding with each other in a game about 45, 50 games ago, have both been under, I think, 175 as hitters. Semien's looking like he's starting to come out of it. Garcia, not so much. They gave him a day off on Sunday to try to solve those issues. Gray gets a double play here from Guillorme to end the inning, but gives up 3 runs there. Just not a good outing here so far for Gray. Really needs to right the ship and stop throwing pitches right down the middle. I mean, even the Angels are going to cream those. You could see the Yankees get Tanner Scott to help the bullpen. Absolutely, Tanner Scott from the Marlins. Probably the most available reliever on the market right now. I think before the season even began, there was some conversation about him being available, and then the 9-game losing streak to start the season all but cemented him being traded here before the deadline. Astros are indeed heating up. We'll talk about them here. They are 2 games back in the division of the Mariners. They look quite formidable. They're getting a lot of great performances out of people you would not expect. Blanco coming into the year was not thought of as one of their big-time starters. He's been one of their best starters so far this year with the injuries that they've had to deal with in that rotation. He's been a godsend for that staff. The Rangers, meanwhile, they had hoped to stay around 500 up until the All-Star break. Well, right now they're 6 games under. They're starting to play a little bit better brand of baseball. They're starting to play a little bit better offensively, which has really been the biggest problem. Their bullpen has had up and down performances, much like last year, but Kirby Yates has really solidified things as a closer. David Robertson looks just as good as a setup guy. That rotation, which we thought would be a bit of a blind spot for the Rangers here in the first half of the season, really has been the best part of this team. Michael Lorenzen's been great for them. Eovaldi's been great. They got a great month out of Bradford. Dunning was good for the first month, and then he cooled off. But looking at this Rangers team, they're 6 games back in the division. The Mariners, I believe, are idle, and the Astros are idle. So they could close this to 5.5 games with a win over the Angels tonight. If they can get this deficit in the division down to, say, 4 or 3, you'd have to believe that CY, Chris Young, the general manager for the Texas Rangers, is going to buy here at the deadline. I would say as long as this team stays within 7 or 8 games of the top of this division, I think Chris Young is going to buy at the deadline. Now, if they fall back and lose the 5 of the next 6 games, and Mariners start to get a little hot, and the Astros stay hot, and then they come out of the All-Star break and they're stumbling still, and their offense hasn't turned it around, I think that's the doomsday scenario where the Rangers do decide to sell. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic put out a great article today about the Rangers, kind of holding the keys to the deadline on the American League side, just because they have so many pitchers that they could trade here before the deadline. I'm still curious to see if they ultimately decide to do so. They got Bruce Bochy as manager, Corey Seager on the team, Chris Young, all highly competitive guys. Not to say that other teams aren't. It's just those guys they just have a certain grit to them that even if, you remember years ago how the Red Sox, I believe, entering the month of September were, 10 games back in the division, ultimately came back, or were 10 games up in the division, and the Rays came back, or something along those lines. I think it's the Rays came back on them, but I think the Rangers, the front office, the players on the field, Bruce Bochy, the manager, believe that they're the type of team that can do that, even with as poor of a performance as they put on the field. So I think they're going to play a little bit better than 500 baseball going into the All-Star break, and I think they're going to buy here at the deadline. The Angels, the team they're facing tonight, 15 games under 500, 4-6 in their last 10, 12 back in the wild card, 10.5 in the division. They've had a decent stretch of baseball over the last, say, 20, 25 games, but the wheels are starting to come off a little bit. There's not much to look forward to if you're an Angels fan. Maybe the development of Joe Adell, a once top prospect, might be able to catch a little bit of fire. But it just hasn't happened. We saw the RBI single today, but he really has been one of the league's worst hitters for the last 2 months. And they just need to start developing some of their young guys in their system and stop rushing them to the big leagues in an effort to stay competitive in the AL West. They're not competitive. They're not going to be competitive until they decide to go through a full rebuild. Shohei Ohtani, we've talked quite a bit about the organizational malpractice anyway, about not trading him 2 years before his free agency, the trade deadline before that, the trade deadline after that, the off season with a year left on his deal, trade deadline last year, and ultimately they lose him for nothing. They're going to get a competitive balance pick or some draft compensation back, but we're talking about even at the deadline last year, they could have gotten a Juan Soto level package back for him, and ultimately chose not to do so. Safe to say the Angels are going to have to go through a period much like the Oakland A's are right now of an extended rebuild. They do have a nice piece. Kevin Pillar said he's going to announce he announced that he's going to be retiring at the end of the season. They have Anderson, they have Estevez. There's some nice pieces that are available for the Angels if they decide to trade, to sell before the deadline, which they will. I would expect Estevez is already being shopped right now. We've seen multiple reports about that. I would expect him to go probably right around the deadline, maybe a couple of days before. He is a good reliever with some closer ability as well. So those guys are going to be in demand. A guy like Kevin Pillar, a guy who can play all three outfield spots, who's having a nice year offensively, a little bit of pop in that bat this year, and a guy who's really kind of chasing a ring this year. I would expect him to try to ask out and see if he can get onto one of these World Series contending teams that need a core outfielder, need an outfielder. I would expect him to possibly end up on the Atlanta Braves with the Ronald Acuna injury. He would be a nice fit there to kind of round out their outfield with Acuna on the shelf for the rest of the year. Moving on to the NL East. Philadelphia Phillies, the best team in the league this year, 5-5 in their last 10. Lost their last 2, however. They're 58-32, 26 above 500, with the Braves 8 games back in the division. Safe to say the Phillies, I think, are going to run away and hide with this one. The question is, what are they going to look like with their health come October? They've had significant injuries in the past of big-time players. Right now, they've got a couple of guys that are just a little bit nicked up here and there, but Real Muto's missed some serious time this year. Harper's missed a little bit of time already. Schwarber's missed some time. They just need to get to October healthy and with that rotation intact. So adding one more piece as a center fielder would be nice for them, and one more reliever I think would really shore up this team. But outside of that, there's really not much this team needs. Maybe somebody who can come in and start, be their 6th starter, if you will, just kind of come in and eat some innings to keep those innings down on their big-time starters like Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Suarez, and company. Braves, they're second in the division. They're 10 games up, above 500 anyway. They're 3 up in the wild card, 8 back in the division. This is a team that's clearly going to be a wild card team. I think they need to add one outfielder. I do think they need to add some depth in that rotation. A Tyler Anderson would be a nice fit there for the Braves. He would also be a fit, like you said, Sarah, with the Cardinals. But the Braves do need to make some additions here. So expect them to be active, not necessarily with high-level prospects, because they really don't have too many of those left, but probably more with quantity, adding some pieces around the periphery that aren't going to cost a whole lot. Some lower-level acquisitions might be in store here for the Braves. Nationals, Mets, and Marlins, I'd put them all kind of in one category, with the Marlins being a clear seller, but all 3 of these teams are not contenders for the division crown. The Mets, Brandon Nimmo said he wants them to go all in and compete and try to win the wild card and win the World Series. That's not how teams usually run things. They're 1 game under 500 right now. They dropped a game tonight anyway to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They got a good start, but their bullpen kind of coughed it up for them. They're 2.5 back of the wild card, 13.5 back of the division. They're not winning the division clearly. Best case scenario is they make a run and sneak into the wild card, but are you telling me that they're going to beat the Braves? Are you telling me they're going to beat the Phillies, the Dodgers, Padres, Cardinals, whoever might get those other wild card spots? I don't think they're better than any one of those teams. Sure, they could make some acquisitions and make some type of super team and give up all their prospects. They could absolutely do that. But I still think even if they did that, they're not going to be as good as the Phillies. They're not going to be as good as the Dodgers. So I would expect them to either hold pat or sell at the deadline. Nationals have a couple of pieces that they could flip, but their contending window really opens up next year. C.J. Abrams, all-star this year. They got a bunch of good young starters on that staff that look like they're going to be aces for years to come. They're a really good team. They're also my dark horse team to sign a Juan Soto. You guys can check out my video from, I want to say, Friday, where we talked a little bit about that in depth. But they're going to have all this kind of money. Boris is eager to kind of show that he's not, the game hasn't passed him by, that he's still got this market down, that he's still going to get the best deal for his players. And the Nationals are very friendly with Boris. They've done great deals with Boris in the past. And Soto's, of course, familiar with the team. Still, never, I don't think he left on poor terms, if you will, with the ownership group there. But that would be a fantastic piece for them to kind of round out and kind of accelerate their next contending window to bring back Juan Soto. And it literally would have gotten all their pieces that they got in trade for him, all the pieces that they got for trading away Turner and Scherzer. This team is ready to contend, I believe, next year for at least the division, or at least a wild card, possibly division, depending on what they do this offseason. So keep your eyes peeled for Juan Soto and some dark horse teams coming into the picture like the Nationals. NL Central, we've already talked a little bit about the Brewers and Cardinals, but again, Brewers playing a little bit above their heads, need to add some starting pitching other than the acquisition that they already made in Savali. Cardinals, 6 games above 500, 4.5 back in the division. They currently hold a wild card spot. Pirates, I don't think are going to chase them down, so I think they're kind of locked into that 2 spot in this division and possibly could take down the Brewers as we get into September baseball. I think it's going to be a really tight race all the way to the end. I think it just depends on who ultimately adds the better starter here at the deadline as to who gets the division crown. Now, I do believe the other team will get a wild card spot, so I think both teams will ultimately end up in the postseason. Do I think either of them are World Series contenders? No, but we saw what happened with the Diamondbacks last year, and that's going to give a lot of teams a little bit extra incentive to try to compete for wild card spots. So, prices from sellers are going to be high this year, so kind of keep that in mind. Pirates, Reds, and Cubs, again, kind of all in the same bag here. Probably should sell. Cubs definitely need to sell. Reds just haven't gotten the performance that they were really looking for. Some of the young guys really backed up. They've had some up and down performances. I think they need a change in manager there as well. Pirates have a couple of nice deals that they could spin off here at the deadline, and one of the better closers in the game in Bednar when he is healthy. Even though he's having a little bit of a down year, he'd probably be one of the top 1 or 2 closers on the market if he does become available. NL West, Dodgers, of course, have run away and hid with the division. This one is clearly the Dodgers to lose. Padres currently hold a wild card spot as well. Diamondbacks are 2 games back on the wild card, while the Giants are 3.5 back from a wild card spot. Padres, I do think, will hold on to one of those wild card spots. They will be a buyer here at the deadline. The Diamondbacks, I think they could do a little bit of buying and selling. We mentioned a few times now about Jordan Montgomery, how I'm sure they would love to get off of that deal if he's unable to straighten things out when he returns from the injured list in about a week or 2. He's supposed to get an update tomorrow on his health. He was hit the 15-day IL. More than anything else, we'll call it a light injury, mainly because it's a performance-based issue that the Diamondbacks just needed to call somebody else up to take his spot in that rotation. I'm sure he's dealing with something, don't get me wrong, but the performance on the field just hasn't been good enough, hasn't been up to what Jordan Montgomery has come to even expect of himself, and this is certainly not what the Diamondbacks paid for. They're just getting back Eduardo Rodriguez as well, their other big-time free agent acquisition this offseason. And so if this team continues to scuffle a little bit with the poor performances on the mound from guys like Montgomery, then they could possibly look to just stand pat and maybe try to get off the deal with Montgomery. If they're able to turn things around a little bit and kind of catch a little bit of momentum, then maybe they add one more bullpen piece, one more starter, or one more bat in that lineup. But Skeens has been incredible. Walker absolutely was a snub for the All-Star game. I think he could actually get in there, though, as a replacement there. So, pump the brakes on that one. I think he might actually get in there as a replacement for the All-Star game. But clear sellers, in my mind, are the Rockies and the Giants. Giants just don't have enough. I know this is Farhan Zaidi's, really needs to show that he can compete and win this division, or at least compete for a wild card spot. But in my mind, they need to change management structure there. They need Farhan Zaidi to just move out of the way. They just haven't gotten the job done from the time where they should have gone after Bryce Harper and Manny Machado all the way up till now. They really haven't struck it rich on any of the big-time free agents that are out there. They've had to settle for plan C, D, E, and F in recent memory anyway. They just had, they got lucky anyway, having Matt Chapman fall into their arms. They acquired Robbie Ray off of injury anyway from the Seattle Mariners when he signed that big deal. So there's some, they've at least added some pieces here, but those pieces are damaged goods. I mean, the bat for Chapman at the time was always seen as streaky. He had one good month last year and 5 way below average months offensively at the plate for Toronto. You look at Robbie Ray, he's coming off of Tommy John. He hadn't even suited up for them yet. And so Young-Ho Lee, their big-time free agent acquisition, I thought was a great signing, by the way. Probably the best one that they've had since he's become the GM there. And ultimately, he's going to be out the rest of the year due to, you guessed it, injury. So something to kind of keep in mind as far as the deadline goes is who might be buying and who might be selling. Even though the Giants clearly, in my mind, should be a seller, they may ultimately decide to stand pat and try to make a go of it at the wild card or buy because they're trying to save the job of Farhan Zaidi. When you're trying to do it for those types of reasons, that's when their change needs to happen. And if they're doing it for that reason purely, they need to do it before the deadline. If that he's still trying to do the best thing in the best interest of the team, then maybe he makes it till after the deadline. But he's not got long there for the Giants. I would very much expect a new management structure there next season. But let's kind of go through this list real quick. Buyers, we're going to kind of go with the top 2 in each division. Orioles, Yankees, clearly buyers. Red Sox probably going to stand pat, maybe buy if they get a controllable starter. Central, Guardians are buyers, but they don't really buy. They buy around the periphery, much like the Braves are going to do this year. Twins, they don't really have a lot of money that they could spend this year, but if they can get somebody on the cheap to add some innings to that starting staff, I think they'll go for it. Other than that, they're not going to buy. Royals are not going to add here at the deadline. If anything, they're going to stand pat, but I would expect them to try to sell one of their acquisitions that they made this offseason, their one-year deals. The AL West, there's really 3 teams here, Mariners, Astros, and Rangers. All 3 of these teams I expect to buy as of right now. I think the Mariners need to add at least one more bat, if not 2. They'd be another team I'd keep an eye out for Kevin Pillar here as I watch the Angels and Rangers game. Wyatt Langford is the real deal as far as a speed, power combination. He's certainly turned things around over the last month and a half. He was the Rookie of the Month, I believe, in the American League. Offensively, anyway, he was great for the Texas Rangers, but they still need more offense in Seattle. The Rangers could use some offense that they're going to add here at the deadline and maybe a reliever. They have plenty of starting pitchers, so maybe they peddle one of those starters to add somebody to their bullpen or to add to this lineup. Astros just need to get a little bit more length out of that rotation, so maybe a back-end starter for them. They could also use a first baseman. Their dream first baseman that was leaked anyway was Christian Walker. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but maybe they get a guy on an expiring deal like Alonso or Guerrero Jr., but the market for those guys is going to be a little bit stiffer than I would imagine it would be for similar type hitters in the past, mainly because those 2 guys are true difference makers offensively. You can insert them into the middle of your lineup, and it instantly changes the geometry of how pitchers attack your lineup and allows you to do a lot of different types of things. Guerrero's been playing a lot of third base for the first time in probably 2 or 3 years now. He came up as a third baseman, so he's starting to show some of that flexibility. Garcia gets a nice base hit there. So maybe the day off helped him out. That was a solid piece of hitting there. But that's kind of your buyers on the American League side. NL side, Phillies and Braves, obvious buyers. We talked already about what they're going to go after. Central, Brewers, and Cardinals are going to be buyers. I think the Pirates, if anything, hold on to their pieces, but I think they would like to move some of their one-year deals that they have. Aroldis Chapman, I thought he would have been a nice piece to add here at the deadline for somebody out there, but, it's more of a flyer at this point. And then in the NL West, Dodgers are the clear favorite there. They're probably the favorite outside of the Phillies to win the World Series on the National League side. Padres, everybody thought they'd take a little bit of a step back after they traded Juan Soto. Well, not so fast. They add Dylan Cease, they add Luis Arraez, and I don't think they're done yet. They got great production this year out of Jerks and Profar. Merrill's come up and been a godsend for them. He made the All-Star team, actually. So maybe they add one more reliever or 2 and really beef up the back end of that bullpen. And then, of course, the Diamondbacks, if they can catch a little bit of fire, get into the wild card picture a little bit firmer, sell the Jordan Montgomery deal, make a little bit of money, or free up some money to where they can go after, a lineup addition or somebody who can eat some innings at the back end of that rotation. Something like that would be great. But that's kind of where your buyers are at this year. Padres have been good this year. Yes, they have. Alrighty, so let's kind of go over to our baseballtradevalues.com. I went ahead and subscribed for you guys. That way you guys could have some fun with us. We're going to go ahead and just do it by team. So we're going to go by Orioles and just see what's out there, just to see what Orioles fans out there are clamoring for. Looks like they're looking for a starter, Tarek Skubal, Cy Young candidate anyway on the American League side. It's going to be quite lofty to be able to try to get him. Kobe Mayo, Kellenic, that's not happening. This is not a trade that would happen here, so just ignore that one. Cowser would be the piece going out to the Pirates. That would make a lot of sense. Pirates would love a player like Cowser. But what are you getting back if you're the Orioles? A package? None of those pieces really move the needle if you're the Orioles, so I don't think that's happening either. Manaya from the Mets along with cash in exchange for a couple of small prospects. This could be a deal for the Orioles, adding to the back end of their rotation there. Hurstead to the Pirates. Somebody that's a Pirates fan trying to get some of the Orioles' best prospects. I don't think it's going to happen. Garrett Crochet is the one piece that I have heard connected quite a few times now with the White Sox. Looks like Langford just scored. Let's see how he just scored. I'm not sure what that was. They're calling a balk, but Daniel kind of tripped on the mound and just kind of threw the ball in the dirt and just kind of rolled it up to the plate, trying to save it from a balk. But umpires realized what he was trying to do, and they're not going to. That was not an attempt to throw a pitch. He had already stumbled off the mound, and so a run scores to tie the game. Alrighty, welcome in, Brandon. They need a starter bad, though. Do you think the Orioles make any big moves with that loaded farm system? I do. I think they realized the mistake that they made last year. Another base hit here for the Rangers, and they take a 4-3 lead in the fourth inning over the Angels. Nathaniel Lowe, who's really been swinging a hot bat for Texas recently, is turning things around. Nice work there for Texas. But to kind of answer your question there, Brendan, I think the Orioles made a big mistake last year in not trying to bring in a guy like Corbin Burns, a guy like Dylan Cease. I thought Dylan Cease was the guy for them at the deadline. They didn't get him. Sure, they went out and got Burns this offseason, but they already have a number of guys that are already on the injured list out of that rotation. I would like to see them add at least one more starter for them, and I would like to see them add somebody who's going to start a playoff game for them. So I'm not talking about a Sean Manaea type like we just saw, but like a Garrett Crochet could probably start game 2 or game 3 for you if you're an Orioles fan, but it's going to cost a pretty penny to be able to get it done. Flaherty was an absolute miss, we'll put it that way, as far as a trade piece that they acquired last year. Everybody thought maybe he could catch fire, former Cy Young hopeful, blah, blah, blah. But we saw how that movie went. And going the starter route, back-end starter, just is not the way they need to go. They need to go ahead and get a guy like Crochet, somebody at the top end of the rotation that's going to make a difference. The Rangers, if they were going to sell here at the deadline, I thought Scherzer would be a nice piece for them. He would go back to the Northeast where he's very comfortable and really give them some, really nice upper end talent at the front of the end of that rotation. And Scherzer has been dominant since he's been back. He looks like the old Max Scherzer. The question is, can he stay healthy? But right now, he looks very, very good. But I think the Orioles absolutely need to add here at the deadline. Let's see here. I'm trying to keep up with some of your comments here. Bradish means Wells. Yes, it was a killer. Bautista before the season. They could add another relief pitcher as well. They brought in Kimbrel this offseason, but I still think they're one more reliever as well away. So just looking at what could be available for the Orioles, guys like Garrett Crochet probably be the best one out there. Easiest one for them to acquire. We just mentioned Max Scherzer. Kirby Yates would solve the bullpen role for them. I'm not sure if the Rangers would do that trade, though, even for those three pieces. Tarek Skubal would kind of be a pie-in-the-sky thing. I don't think the Tigers are going to move him. Uh, I like this one. Sorry, Brandon. You want Jack Flaherty back? Or no, was it John Flaherty? I can't remember his name. I just saw Flaherty in the Orioles and it made me laugh. Alrighty, Cabrera from the Marlins would be a nice get. Um, let's see, Anderson. We just talked about Anderson with Sarah anyway from the Angels. He'd be a back-end starter in my mind. Tanner Scott would be a good bullpen arm for them to get. Just kind of round out the last couple of names here. Paul Skeens, Jackson Holiday, not happening. But yeah, that's kind of where the trade market is at for the Orioles. Let's go ahead and just build one real quick for the Orioles just to see what it would cost. We're going to do a couple of different teams here. Usually, we do one or two teams and then we call it, but we're going to try to do a couple of them here. Rangers add another run. It's now 5-3. We're going to go ahead and look at the White Sox. Crochet is probably the easiest piece out there that's going to be traded here as far as a starter for them. There's Garrett Crochet. He's got 2.5 years left of control. Really elevated his potential. He's 25 years old. Let's go ahead and do Garrett Crochet just to see what it would be. To the Orioles. Now, what would the Orioles have to give up here? Obviously, you're not getting Henderson, Holiday, Rutschman, etc. I could see them moving off of the catcher, primarily because they have Adley Rutschman already. First base prospects usually don't garner much trade interest, but he might be the guy that goes out. Westberg certainly could be one. Cowser could be one. Hurstead could be one. I think Hurstead would probably be the centerpiece of the trade here. We'll go ahead and put him in here with the trade. Povich. Let me see how close I am with just those two pieces. We're still about 19 away. Norby as a second base. And about 8 more. Beavers. Okay. That's a pretty close trade there. So what do you guys think of the trade there? Crochet for Hurstead, Povich, Norby, and Beavers. 3 real prospects, and Beavers I think could be one as well, but I kind of like this trade for both teams. Simeon getting another base hit there. Drives in a couple. Rangers now lead at 7-3. What a nice comeback inning for the Rangers there. Pardon me, got something in my eye. But yeah, you look at some of these players on position player prospects for the Orioles. They have a lot of prospects that they could move, but all those guys are certainly blocked at the major league level with a couple of different pieces already there. Like their catcher, Basayo, probably their best prospect in their system as far as value right now. Is blocked by Rutschman, obviously, but of course they could move Rutschman off to first base, DH, etc., to make sure his bat's in there every day, and then call up Basayo, or even just have those two guys playing catcher and the other one DH every day. But technically blocked. But then you look at their other pieces, Hurstead, etc., Beavers, all those guys have got position players in front of them that are playing already at the major league level, but starting pitching really is the need for the Orioles. They need some front-end starters. And if Crochet really is this level of pitcher, they could really have something on their hands if they get something like that done. Hmm. 6'4", 230. That is a big kid, Brendan. So there's kind of the trade there. We'll go ahead and validate the trade, fair trade. I'll go ahead and post it to the board. That way other people can see it. If you guys already have a subscription, now you guys can like it, all that kind of thing as well. I put a comment on it so that way you guys know which one it is. Alrighty, let's go back to the trade boards again and just see what's the next team we can go with. We'll go with the Yankees. We'll go division by division here. We told you guys there was 2 real buyers in this division. Ooh, former top prospect Carson Fulmer. I remember when he was drafted. He looks different than when he was drafted, though. Is this the same Carson Fulmer who was the former top prospect from Vanderbilt, from the White Sox? Is this the same Carson Fulmer? It can't be. He looks too different. Anyway, we're going to go with the Yankees. All right, so the Yankees, we talked earlier that they need to add a starting pitcher. They need to add some bullpen and a corner infielder. Probably be the best thing for them. They're playing a little bit of lackadaisical in the field, of course, which the Yankees have been known to do from time to time. I thought that was Michael Fulmer. The one from Vanderbilt, the one that was drafted along with Dansby Swanson, I think. They were on the same team. That's who I was trying to refer to. I think it's Carson Fulmer, and that doesn't look like the Carson Fulmer. I remember him having long, curly, blonde hair. That guy had a short, brown hair. Angels, of course, it's been 7 years, 8 years since that happened. But anyway, he looks way different if that's the same Carson Fulmer. 6-5 in the 8th. Well, I mean, it's the Twins. It's the Twins. If you're not a Twins fan, you won't understand, but the Twins have a knack for playing down to their level of competition. All right, so let's look at some of these trade possibilities that are out here. Cody Bellinger, Yankees aren't going to take on that kind of money when they're already having to kind of curb the expectations around Juan Soto. Do not expect Cody Bellinger. Tanner Scott would be a good bullpen addition. I kind of like this trade overall. 9 to 9.1. I kind of like this deal here. I'd trim some of the extra beef here, so I'd take off like Brazoban, and I'd probably take off Hall, and maybe take off Lang as well, and just add a small prospect to round this deal out. But that'd be a good trade for the Yankees. Tommy Pham, it doesn't make sense for them to add a corner outfielder, even though Pham is a decent player at this point in his career. Jason Dominguez is probably their biggest trade piece right now. If they decide to bring back Soto this offseason, then I think Dominguez would become the premium trade piece out there. But you don't really want to use that piece to offload salary like a Stanton, etc. So Dominguez, if there's a big-time piece that's available that can affect their team for the next 3-4 years, then I think Dominguez could be available in trade this year. But other than that, they're not moving him in a small trade here or busting him up between a couple of pieces. A trade here for like Nolan Gorman for the Cardinals might satisfy the long-term hope there. Gorman, the Cardinals have a lot of players that, I'm not going to say they're blocked by other players, but I'm going to say that they have multi-positional versatility that allows them to get into the lineup more than they otherwise would on another team. And so maybe freeing up some at-bats would really be the best case for them. But you remember the issue that they had this offseason was they had too many outfielders. They traded O'Neill, and adding Dominguez really would just put him right back in that same position. So I'm not expecting them to go after another outfield player there. Looking at the Yankees here, going after another reliever here, another bench piece in Rengifo. He's a little bit better than a bench piece this year. I think he would solve their third base issues for the Yankees and a reliever. As far as what it would cost the Yankees, a grab bag of nothing. None of those guys really move the needle. None of these guys really move the needle either. And so this might be a fairly decent trade. Valera, I haven't heard too much about him. Selvage, trim out some of these extra, take the Guardians out of this deal, and maybe just do the deal for, you know, Estevez and Rengifo for a couple of smaller level prospects. They won't trade Neely. Looks like a bullpen stud. Well, if they need bullpen help, maybe they want somebody who's got some experience, and so the guy going back in exchange for Estevez would be a guy like Neely. But we shall see. Oh, one thing I should mention real quick before I get into the next trade discussion, anyway, is we had a groundbreaking development as far as how to watch your favorite team here in Texas. The Dallas Stars recently ended their agreement with the Bally Sports or Diamond Sports Group, anyway, and so their games will not be on Bally Sports next year. So everybody was wondering what's going to happen with them. Well, they're going to be going to Victory Plus. Basically, they're going to be on a streaming service for free. Now, it's ad supported, etc., etc. And so you got to wonder how that's going to really work as far as live games. Are they going to generate enough ad revenue? Is this a model that could work for teams like the Rangers, who have a lot of issues right now with Bally Sports as well? Dallas Mavericks, if you're a basketball fan, are also on Bally. Could that be a solution for them? But this is the first of its kind as far as a free streaming service, ad supported, etc. That really could be a game changer as far as how we view sports. So, kind of keep your eyes open in this space for what could happen for baseball. But getting back to our trade discussion here about the Yankees, Vierling, they're not going to trade for a prospect. Well, not really a prospect, but a younger player from the Tigers. They're not going to get him off of that team. Now, this is the one I was kind of curious about. Ryan McMahon has had a really great performance. Wow. If you're watching the Rangers games, back-to-back line drives to Josh Smith. The first one he tried to drop and get a double play on. Umpires were smart on it and just said, no, that wasn't a legit one. Smith didn't even try to do that on this one. He tried to double him up, but has a nice little wry laugh with the umpire there who wouldn't let him have the double play that they were hoping for just a minute ago. But anyway, back to the Ryan McMahon conversation here. Yankees need to add a corner outfielder, or excuse me, a corner infielder. McMahon solves that issue, and he also has second base versatility. Left-handed hitter, having a nice year this year. Has some money left on that deal as well. I think he'd be a good fit there long term to replace Rizzo, or at least play third base until Rizzo is gone. I would really like the fit of a guy like Ryan McMahon. As far as the acquisition cost, one, are the Rockies willing to move him? And two, what kind of a price could it be for? Now, if you're the Rockies, you're probably going to want some pitching back. You always want pitching back because you never seem to have enough, let alone any pitching to speak of. Yankees could give some of their older starters in their system that are starting to age out. Something like that would work, I think, plus maybe a good young position player prospect. That might get the job done. As far as a position player, I think McMahon probably is the best fit on the market right now for the Yankees. They mentioned Yandy Diaz here. Only 8.3 as far as the trade value there. I don't think the Rays have any qualms about trading within the division. I don't think there's any issue there. I think the issue becomes Yandy Diaz and what his value might be to the Yankees versus what his value might be to a team like the Houston Astros. I think the Houston Astros would covet Yandy quite a bit. I don't think they're going to be able to get a guy like Christian Walker, so I think they're going to go out there and try to get a guy like Yandy Diaz before they go after guys like Pete Alonso or Vlad Guerrero Jr. Now, the question is, are the Rays going to trade Diaz? Remains to be seen, but could be a nice piece at the deadline if the Rays decided to move him. But that's kind of where we're at with the Yankees. I'm trying to look for a starter trade here. Bo Bichette as a trade option here. I don't think that's going to happen. Bassett going back into New York. He's had up and down Year and a half anyway for the Blue Jays. I don't know about that. I don't really see any starters trades here that are making any sense, but we'll go ahead and do one trade here for the Yankees, like we just did for the Orioles. So bear with me here. Who should we do this one with? Should we do it for a starter? Position player? We're going to go first base, third base. Let's go for a team like... who else could be out there? Maybe with some starters to spare. One I haven't mentioned yet anyway today. Let's go with the Marlins. Now you're going to see the Marlins pop up in quite a few of these trades here, but let's look at what the Yankees could use off of this Marlins team. Especially if they believe in Ben Rice. Yes. Okay. Let's see where we're at. Headline today from the Miami Marlins was that Jazz Chisholm could be the guy that's available. There you go, Brendan. That's the name I was thinking of. Jake Burger, I think, would be a great fit. Kind of fit in with what the Yankees do offensively, power type of a player. I'm not saying this is the best fit overall. I just think that this is the type of player that fits what the Yankees have gone for in the past. They seem to be more of a... They have a one specific mold of a player, and they use that mold over and over and over and over again. And it hasn't worked up until this year. Now, they're playing better this year up until recently. Health has been a big factor in that, of course, but athleticism they haven't really seemed to value as much. Power seems to be the one thing that's probably first and foremost there. And Berger certainly does have that in spades. So let's go ahead and look at the Major League roster here. This is why I mentioned the Marlins here, because it's not going to cost too much. 9.3 for Berger. Got, 4.5 years left to control, so his costs will be controlled for you. Allows you to keep a guy like Soto around if money is a big issue for you to try to keep him. Well, now you don't have to go out in the market and spend for a third baseman because you've got a guy like Jake Burger. I think he'd be a great fit there. He can flex a little bit around the diamond as well. He can play a little bit of third base. I've seen him play a couple of games at second and first. I want to say he played second anyway last year against the Rangers for a game or two anyway, when the Marlins came to town. I think it was actually at that game. But he's also a clutch player. I think he'd be a good fit with the Yankees. So what could the Yankees ultimately give up for him? Again, it's only a 9.3. You're not going to have to give up a whole heck of a lot. Let's go with the minors team here. Go with our surplus. Now remember, 9.3, so you're not going to get Jones, Arias, or Lombard. Hampton probably be the best piece you could hope for, but I don't think the Yankees would do something like that. Yankees usually go with something along the lines of a package of players. They don't like to give away their top-end pieces. Think of the Joey Gallo deal and how everybody panned that deal now because of the Rangers getting Josh Smith and Ezekiel Duran and two other prospects, Trevor Hauver, who's still in the minor leagues for the Rangers, and Glenn Otto, a pitcher for the Rangers who has since moved on, but he was at least serviceable at the beginning of that deal, and how Gallo really didn't work out in New York. Well, they've done it multiple times, and it's not just been that Joey Gallo deal. They seem to like giving up quantity over quality. So just think of where the Yankees would be right now if they still had Josh Smith as their everyday third baseman, Ezekiel Duran still in their prospect pool. Duran's been kind of up and down this year because of his inability to stay in the lineup anyway. So he went down to the minor leagues to hopefully solve some issues offensively, and then he'll be back in the majors, I'm sure. But let's kind of see what we could build here. If you're the Marlins, you need position players first and foremost. I would try to go for a guy like Ramirez here, the catcher. You could go for a couple pitchers. Maybe a couple of younger pitchers like Selvage, but you already have a good starting staff, and you're going to get better next year when you get Perez and Alcantara back and healthy. I still would go the position player route. So I would go the younger position player route as well. So let's go ahead and just do Ramirez as the headliner of this package. And we'll throw a 17-year-old in there as well, just to kind of round out this deal. All right, I think that's a pretty fair deal. Yankees have some decent catching options already on the Major League club. I don't think if they wanted to upgrade there that they would give it to a young guy. I think they would try to go the free agency route like they've done in the past. But I think they're pretty set at what they want to do at catcher right now. But looking at this deal, this would solve their third base issues for the Yankees for the next few years. Now the question is, will they have one more DH on their hands in 2 or 3 years? Is he a third baseman in 2 or 3 years? But for right now, he would solve their third base issues, and I think he would be a great get for them as well. Try to get Nardi or Scott too. They absolutely could add Scott to this deal. They could add him. Cabrera could be added. There were some rumors about a Torres for Cabrera deal this offseason. Could be a fit there, or maybe even Luzardo being available, etc. But I think that a guy like Berger, maybe Scott, would be the best pieces, lowest cost pieces for the Yankees to acquire before the deadline. Alrighty, so we've done the Orioles. You guys can check that one out on our video from earlier. Rewind a little bit if you'd like and check that one out. We'll go ahead and post this one to the trade board as well. There we go. That way you guys know where that trade is at. All right. He can't have any trade value. Exactly. Alrighty. Next team we want to look at is going to be a team like the Guardians. Now we're going to not spend too much time on this one, primarily because the Guardians really don't do much at the deadline. Small pieces around the edges is probably the best case scenario. You're not going to take on money from the Cubs. That's not happening. I don't see a trade here so far. You're not trading your young catcher. Ooh. For Langeliers and Rooker, though. That might be a nice splitting of prospect there, if you will. Rooker would give them a nice bat. Langeliers another good catcher. I actually kind of like this trade here. Guardians, I do think, need some starting pitching. They could go back to the well and bring back Cal Quantrill. I don't think it'll happen, but they could do that. I like this stack as well, Rooker and Miller, but I don't really like giving up all those prospects if you're the Guardians. This is not a throw all your chips to the middle type of season for them. Bleday, Zach Gallen, that's not happening. Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Kikuchi, that could be interesting. Now, I don't think they would do it for Chiriot, but could be very interesting to get those two. Bo Bichette could be an interesting get for them as well. Guerrero Jr. could be a nice fit there with the Blue Jays. I don't really see too many options. We're just going to go quickly here and just go ahead and do one quick trade here for the Guardians. We'll kind of make our own version of that Blue Jays trade. Or they do need some starting pitching. Let's go with the Rangers. Now remember, if the Rangers are probably going to be a buyer as well, but they have so many pitchers on their staff right now, when they do get them all healthy, they are going to have to trade at least one of them to be able to keep everybody on the 40-man and still improve their team. So let's go look at the Rangers as far as who they could move. Now remember, the Guardians like to have control of their talent as well. The piece I would look at if I am the Guardians would be a guy like Dane Dunning or a Cody Bradford, something along those lines. Let me see if I can find Dunning in here. Am I missing him? They got his value all the way down at 3. Maybe not Dane Dunning then. Let's go ahead and look at starting pitchers here. Make this a little bit quicker. John Gray. And we'll go ahead and do Dunning. Low cost option for the Guardians. Rangers, can free up a 40-man spot and a active roster spot once he's healthy, etc. What could the Rangers get for him? Well, obviously they want somebody that can make a difference for them, either as a trade piece to flip him, or somebody who's going to help out their bullpen or help out their lineup this year. So, too far down. Let's see who's got negative value for the Guardians, who they might want to get off of. Hedges, the Rangers had good success with him, at least defensively, last year anyway. Scott Barlow could be a low-cost acquisition. Ghost they've had before. Howard they've had before. I don't see any retreads that they would really want. Let's go back to the positive side of things here. And remember, 3 was the value of Dunning. Let's say you go Young, Humphreys, low-cost option, and you go another young guy, Artiles. I don't know who either of these guys are, but a couple of young starters might be enough to get the deal done for Texas. It frees up a spot and gives them some starting pitcher depth, etc., etc. Post it to the trade board, and we'll move on to the Twins. There you go. Let's go to the Twins, shall we? We're going team by team as far as teams that are contenders, teams that might buy here at the deadline. All right. Now remember, they're not going to look to add cash. They're going to try to add some starting pitching, low-cost starting pitching as well. Eric Fetty, I think, would be a great get for the Twins. It's going to cost a pretty penny to get him in, though. Arozarena is having a down year. I'm surprised his value is still as high as it is, at least on this site. Pete Fairbanks as a reliever might be a good option. But I think they need to add some starting pitching. Eflin makes some sense. Kikuchi makes some sense. Kikuchi makes a lot of sense here, actually. I'm not even going to make a trade for this one because I kind of like this one for the Blue Jays and the Twins. So we'll say the Twins would do something like Kikuchi, give themselves an innings eater to kind of help out with their race to try to win that one. Quantrill would be another good one you mentioned there, Brendan. Cal Quantrill, low-cost option, who's having a decent year, at least anyway, for the Rockies. 1.3 is his value. I think he'd be a good fit in Minnesota. They need somebody who's going to eat innings, and he's familiar with that division. He played with the Guardians last year. I think he'd be a good fit there. I kind of like that one. Good idea there, Brendan. All right, so I'll just go ahead and make that one real quick just so we can kind of keep it all cohesive. We'll do the Twins. Rockies, where are you? Gomber was another one that was mentioned as a piece who could be available. I'll go ahead and put Gomber in this deal as well. And Quantrill. Both of those guys going. AJ Alexy. I think he'd be a decent fit for the Rockies at 0 value right now. He's got some potential though, but he's 26, so he's basically exhausted at this point. Go with a young starter here, 19-year-old guy. Fits the Rockies' timeline because they're not going to be contending for a significant period of time. Beltre, a 17-year-old. And we'll go ahead and throw in a shortstop as well. I kind of like this trade. Twins get a couple of players who can help them now, while the Rockies get a starter who can go back into that rotation and at least eat some innings. And then you get 3 super young prospects there. You know, who knows what any one of those guys become. I think the oldest one in that group was 19, but you get an 18, a 17-year-old, and a 19-year-old, and a guy who can at least, pitch at the major league level for you. In exchange for Gomber and Quantrill. Might cost you one more piece if you're the Twins, but I kind of like this deal. Validate, post a trade board. Royce Lewis just went to the IL, I thought. He might not be on there long, though. I don't think the injury was long term. They did call up Brooks Lee. He started at third base today. Yeah. There's our Twins trade. All right, now a team that has to make a trade here at the deadline and absolutely will with Trader Jerry as the GM there. Let's look at the Mariners. They need to add some hitting to this lineup. Absolutely need to add some hitting. So where are people looking here? Well, Bellinger, there was some rumors about him going there. I don't know about that at this point. Chisholm, I don't know about that at this point either. Casas, I don't know about that. They have a lot of first base options already. Scott to help out their bullpen, sure. Not really seeing anybody that would make a difference for them. Marte not making a difference for them. Chisholm, I don't know about that. Luis Robert would be a nice option, but I don't know about that either. Randy Rosarena might make some sense. They were connected to him before. He is not performing well though. They like power out there in Seattle. Vlad Guerrero, I think, would make some sense. Put him over at third base. Casey Mize, no. Move out Haniger, bring in Bassett and Bellinger. Nico Horner, wow, they're really hoping for the moon on this one. Brent Rooker, Taylor Ward, maybe. You're not trading Gilbert. I don't know what people's fascination with Miguel Andujar is. Rooker's value just doesn't make too much sense for what the Mariners are doing right now. I think they could get a better player, both for this season and for their future, if they decided to go after a guy like Vlad Guerrero or somebody of that ilk, rather than a guy like Brent Rooker, whose value is going to be a little bit inflated because of the control left on his deal. Other than that, I think he would make some sense from, hey, we need to improve our offense, period, type of a mindset. So I am with you there, at least, Brennan and Sarah. Eloy Jimenez has not been good over the last couple of years. I'm just not seeing anybody who's going to be a real difference maker. For instance, like Brian Wu was the piece that was going to be traded this offseason in exchange for a piece like Nolan Gorman from the Cardinals or something along those lines. That's the level of trade I think they were hoping to be able to make here at the deadline. They could still go out there and make a big-time acquisition. I just don't think there's that on the market. The Jays probably value Vladdy a lot more than the A's value Rooker name value. Sure, I'll give you name value, but looking at the contract that's left for Vladdy versus the contract that's left for Rooker, I think that the value is going to be there for Rooker because of the contract that's left for him, the controllable years. Another name I had forgotten about, Ian Happ. Might be a nice name out there here at the deadline. Winker is having a nice year for the Nationals. Obviously, things did not work out for the Mariners before. This isn't a bad trade. They add to their starter, they lose a starter and bring in a replacement there in Fetty, while adding to their rotation or while adding to their outfield. Not a bad deal, but I wouldn't do it if I'm the Mariners. There's nothing really that moves the needle if I'm the Mariners. Yandy Diaz might make some sense there. Rangers, just to give you guys an update, 7-3. They still lead it in the top of the 6th against the Angels. Suzuki, I don't know about that. I don't I don't like that value either on him. Um, who's the one I just mentioned? Would the O's and Mariners link up for a major leaguer deal? Mountcastle for a major league ready prospect and a major league ready prospect for a starter. They could. Um, they're both in the American League, though. Not that I think that really matters. They're across divisions, opposite ends of the entire United States. But that's kind of an interesting idea there. Um, who was the other player I just saw a minute ago? Ian Happ was the other one. Okay. I didn't want to forget about that one for other deals. Let's go ahead and go over to the Mariners trade and just see if what we can come up with. Now remember, they're looking for an impact bat, not just somebody who's going to, oh, there's an error by the second baseman in the Angels game. Drury makes a, coughs one up anyway, and Jankowski is on first. Anyway, Mariners, let's see. Let's go ahead and look at your idea there. The Orioles. Not the right team. There we go. Let's say Wu is the piece going back the other way. I don't think that's a good idea for the Orioles, but let's just say, for argument's sake, they want Brian Wu. Or maybe George Kirby, his comments last year really affected him and they want to trade off Kirby. Whatever the case may be. The trade would probably have to be centered around one of these players here, Cowser, Hurstead, etc. Is that the bat that you're looking for if you're a Mariners team looking to compete this year? I don't think so. Alonso and Guerrero basically are the same player for me. As far as their availability, as far as what they would cost in a trade, very, very similar. Welcome in, John. Appreciate you joining us once again. We've talked quite a bit about that one, John. As far as the Rangers, I think if they stay within 8 games, 9, 10 games of the division before the trade deadline, I think they will buy, or at the very least stand pat. Unless they absolutely start losing a bunch of games here in the run up to the All-Star break, and then come out of the All-Star break and just cough up 6, 7, 8 games in a row, then I think that's the only scenario where I see them selling at this point. They're only 6 games back. They could be 5.5 back here, as Jankowski steals second in the game. But I don't think they're gonna make a sell type of a move, at least at this point. Now, I could be surprised. We shall see. All right, but on second thought, looking at this trade, Brandon, I just don't see the framework that would work. Mayo for Kirby, I don't think that does anything for the Mariners this year. I think they're trying to compete right now, so looking for impact bats right now. And they have freed up a little bit of money to where they could try to sign somebody in the offseason. Maybe the best case scenario for them is they add a piece here before the deadline and see if they can kind of keep him around for a year, or keep him around after the All-Star break and into free agency, to try to convince him that Seattle's the place where he wants to be. I don't think they would be, the team that either Alonso or Vlad Guerrero Jr. would choose. But if they get them in the building, maybe there's or maybe they can convince them to stay. But let's go ahead and flip it over to. Let's go look at the Blue Jays first. We're going to look at the Major League roster. Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr. only 8.5, whereas Rooker's worth 20.5. Guerrero Jr.'s got a year and a half left. I thought he had an option, but anyway, in either event, not a whole lot of value left there. Alejandro Kirk could be available as well, as far as a catcher upgrade over a guy like Garver. Something like that could be in the works. Okay. Let's go ahead and flip it on to the Cubs. I like the idea of Ian Happ because of his flexibility. Years left. Kyle Hendricks, Jorge Lopez, Hector Neris. Neris is another option that could be available as far as a bullpen arm. Let's go ahead and put him in the trade here. Ian Happ, 9.9 with 2.5 years left. Outside of that, I really don't see anything else that makes too much sense. What if they just say, have it in trade for Trout? He's supposed to be back soonish. Yeah, but Trout, even when healthy, hasn't been the same Mike Trout that we're used to. Mike Trout, they're probably going to have to eat, half of the money left on Mike Trout's deal just to be able to get off of his deal in exchange for nothing. Then you're talking about eating at least 3/4 of the deal for Mike Trout to be able to get something back in return. It just doesn't make sense if you're the Angels to move him. You hope he stays healthy the rest of the year once he gets back and he goes back on one of his, torrid stretches and rebuilds his value, and then you trade him in the offseason if you trade him. But I think Mike Trout is pretty much staying put there with the Angels. But if you're looking for somebody, who could be a difference maker for you in the playoffs, somebody who might raise his game with the ability or with the thought process there being, hey, he's never been able to get to the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe a pennant chase is just what the doctor ordered for a guy like Mike Trout. Maybe you make something like that happen. But let's see what this trade would do here. Hector Neris and Ian Happ. Ian Happ again with playing. He could play probably one of those middle infield spots as well. Probably play some first base if you needed him to. Corner outfield, center field. Good positional flexibility and pretty decent hitter. Hector Neris, up and down reliever, probably fits more in the 7th, 8th inning role, and Mariners could use another arm in that type of position. Their bullpen, I think, is ranked 12th in the majors right now. Their starters are 3rd. They could use a little bit of an upgrade to that bullpen. Neris, I think, would fit in that Ryan Stanek type of role for that team, and then you'd have a couple of arms very similarly valued who pitched well for the Astros last year when they were a part of the Astros bullpen. Alrighty, what could the Mariners give up in return? We're talking about a 6 and change value. Well, you're not giving up any of these top-end pieces, that's for sure. Probably not giving anybody up on that first page. Class A would be a nice piece going back the other direction for the Cubs. I think they would like more of the starter here in Hopkins. Especially with the way the Mariners have been able to develop minor leaguers recently as far as pitchers. And we'll give him a major league arm going back the other way as well in Hancock. A little bit of an overpay. We could go ahead and take out Hancock there. Let's go ahead and throw in a first baseman. There you go. So there's the trade for the Mariners to try to get them a little bit better. Validate the trade. Fair trade. Post to the trade board. And if you guys want to check out a lot of the trades that we've been doing so far this evening, you guys are more than welcome to log in, baseballtradevalues.com. Check them out. I've been commenting underneath the ones I've posted with the Upside Sports Network. If I can spell. There's where we are. Alright, now for the Astros. The Rangers rival the Mariners, trying to hold off this hard-charging team. What could they be looking for here at the deadline? Well, we've mentioned first base. I think that's probably where they ultimately go here at the deadline. They could also look for some starting pitching and a reliever. But if I'm a betting man, I would go ahead and bet on the Astros adding a starter. I kind of like the idea of them going after Vlad Guerrero Jr. or a Yandy Diaz type of player. Pete Alonso makes some sense as well. So we'll probably end up going with something there. As far as a starter, maybe a guy like Tyler Anderson from the Angels anyway could make some sense. Maybe a back-end starter from the Marlins makes some sense here as well. Cal Quantrill, Gomber that we've already mentioned before could be some options there. But I think first base is where we're going to focus here for the Astros. What could they get? I think we already know what the options are. So we're talking Guerrero, we're talking Alonso, we're talking Yandy. Now, we'll start with Yandy Diaz just because we haven't talked too much about him yet. Oop. There we go. Let me see who's on the Major League roster here. That way we can kind of keep it simple. All right. Yandy Diaz, his value right now is... Am I missing him? His value is all the way down to 3.3. Are you kidding me? Wow. That is really low value for Yandy Diaz. I get it, he's an older player. But, I mean, he's not even a full year removed from winning the American League batting average title there. I mean, he's a good player. 2.5 years left. He's not going to be a free agent until he's 35. You're probably not going to even have to pay him at that point either. This is like the Astros' dream player, and a 3.3 value. I think the site's a little low on him. I'll put it this way. I think worst case scenario, Diaz is probably worth probably 10 right now. So we'll go ahead and put him in the trade. Just, bear with us for just a minute. We're going to kick in another player here just to where we can kind of make this, make some more sense. Who doesn't have a lot of control left on a deal that has a little bit of money? Eflin, you just mentioned him, Brendan. Let's go ahead and do that deal. Astros get Eflin and Diaz in exchange for... Who could the Astros give up here? They aren't giving away any of those guys. Melton's probably their best piece. He might be the piece that has to be thrown in here. He's a 23-year-old outfielder. I'm not sure the Rays would really value him. Bloss might make some sense. We'll go ahead and put him in the deal. Matthews as a shortstop. They're going to need some shortstops because of Franco's thing off the field. And Baez was a trade guy I was paying attention to at the deadline last year. All right, so looking at the value here, we're a little high. Let's go ahead and take out the starter. Now we're around 3 that we need in this trade. Let's go with another shortstop. And there we go. Fair trade, etc., etc. I actually like this deal for both teams. Astros keep their top end pieces. Matthews would be the headliner going back, along with Baez. They get another good young shortstop option. Only a 20-year-old shortstop, Alberto Hernandez. 300 with a 900 OPS. He could be the difference maker in this trade that would make giving up a guy like Yandy Diaz, who's, I'm not going to say limited to first base, but for the Rays' purposes, he is. I think he'd be exactly what the doctor ordered for the Astros as far as a cost-controlled first base option. Zach Eflin, you know what his cost is going to be, and solves your starting pitcher issues for next season if you're unable to bring back Justin Verlander. I kind of like this deal. This might be my favorite one we put together so far. Let's go ahead and validate one more time and post it. Submit. I really like that deal. It does nothing to extend the window for the Astros as far as their long-term ability to stay in contention. It does, however, keep their window open for a year, maybe one more year after this one, because this is probably the last year they were going to have a chance to win the World Series. Rays, I don't think they care who they trade pieces to. I think they think they're going to get the better end of a trade, no matter which option they go or which team they trade to. They think they're going to get the better end of the deal. In this case, I think this is a pretty even trade. Astros get exactly what they need: starting pitching and a first baseman. I like Baez. I think he's got a real chance. Bryce Matthews, as you mentioned, hitting the cover off the ball, Brandon. I love this trade. Like, chef's kiss. It's beautiful. Let us know in the comments section what you think of this trade here. Astros getting Diaz and Eflin from the Rays in exchange for Baez, Matthews, and Hernandez. I would agree with you there, Brendan. I think the Rays would be thrilled with that return. The only question I think they would have is we're not getting a starter back. I think they already have plenty of starters in their system that they have enough faith in already, but it is very much a Rays move. Baez was the piece I thought that the Mets were going to ultimately end up getting in exchange for Verlander last year. He did not go in that deal. Matthews has really elevated his prospect status this year. I would really like this trade if I'm a fan of the Rays. The only question I would have is, do they demand a starting pitcher in return as well? Lower level starter, somebody, 17, 18-year-old kid who has no trade value that you're just hoping on, the youth that it might pan out. And the Rays don't like paying salary, so yes, they get off of the Eflin money. Eflin's a pretty good player, though. As far as a starter, he probably slots in as number 4 in this rotation next year. And it takes another need off the board for them in free agency and at the deadline in starter and first base. Now they can worry about trying to lock up Bregman. They can worry about locking up Tucker, Alvarez, all those guys, because now they have, Eflin locked in for 18. And then as far as Diaz goes, his money is very well controlled anyway when you compare it to other first base targets that they could be going after. McClanahan, as you mentioned, will be back next year. Rays, I think, will capitalize on this opportunity to sell this year. But this is by far the best trade I think we've made since we started doing this today. I'm a Rangers fan. I originally loved the Astros when I was a kid. Richard Hidalgo, Moises Alou, Jeff Bagwell, Craig Biggio, Lance Berkman, all those guys. Those were the Astros I cheered for. Roy Oswalt, Wandy Rodriguez, those types of players. The recent iteration of this team I couldn't really cheer for, and it's not because of the trash can thing. It was because of George Springer. It was because of Carlos Correa, and those guys are no longer with the team. I just didn't like the brashness that they played with, the lack of reverence that they played with. And those were the teams, before them that I could really, connect to as a fan. And since I'm primarily a Rangers fan anyway, it just made it that much easier when that cockiness really came through that you could turn the channel real quick on a team like the Astros when you have those types of players on there. But, a guy like Jose Altuve, I really value the way he plays the game. He's a shorter guy, but boy, does he have a lot of power in that bat. Great on-base percentage guy. Signed for the next 5 years. He's going to be a career Astro. Really went through those tough seasons, and you got to respect him for that. Being the one guy that was there through those hard years to get them to the World Series. And a trade like this, Yandy Diaz and Eflin, would be a great get for them to kind of extend the window around Altuve and Tucker and Alvarez and Bregman. All those guys. Diaz really has solved their catcher problem as well. They just need to kind of lock up some starting pitching and lock up the guys that are about to hit free agency. And we know that ownership group doesn't like to spend money, so we'll be curious to see who they retain. Corey Seager gets a double here, it looks like. Stand-up double. Another extra base hit for Corey Seager. Looks like he's hitting well. Fulmer looks like he's absolutely exhausted on the mound. Anyway, 7-3, Rangers still lead it in the, I believe, 7th inning now. So, let's continue our trades here. Now, you guys know I'm a Rangers fan, so I'm going to go ahead and preface that once again before I get into this. I have an idea of what the Rangers could do here at the deadline, and we shall see. Alright. So there's the one we just posted a minute ago to kind of get the Guardians something at the deadline, a controllable starter to help solve their issues. Do I think the Rangers would do something similar to this? Sure, but I don't think they really care. They would care for this package. I think they would be looking for other pieces that could help their major league roster in the short term before they go that route. Say like a Bednar from the Pirates or some type of a relief pitcher. I don't think they'll move a guy like Eovaldi, even if they do become sellers. I think his vesting option will actually happen, and they'll hold on to him through the deadline and into next year. I think he's only got to pitch like 60 more innings before that option vests. Short of him getting an injury, that option should vest, and I think the Rangers would prefer it to actually hit, because if he goes into free agency and they don't make the postseason, then you got to wonder if he'll be back. Now, team and player seem to get along really well, but we all thought that with the Red Sox, that he would just go back there even though the Red Sox weren't going to be contending. Well, the Rangers just won a World Series. Maybe he sees the Rangers as a long-term home for him, but I think the Rangers would really like to keep him there. Kenley Jansen, the Sox might move him if they buy. Even if they buy, I think Kenley Jansen is a little pricey, though, for the Rangers. They're trying to save money. That's why I thought a trade of like Jordan Montgomery, if the Rangers did a little bit of buying and selling at the deadline. Say they sold somebody like a John Gray, who's $13 million next year, $13-ish million this year. Get the Diamondbacks to eat, the remainder of Montgomery's salary this year, and then they pay the full boat next year. Something like that could happen, but I don't think they're going to go after any high-priced targets at the trade deadline right now. So kind of keep that in mind, that money is the primary reason why Jordan Montgomery isn't here right now, because they wanted to save money. They have TV deal issues, tax, all those kinds of things are all coming into play for the Rangers, where any other World Series team, if they had those issues locked down, they probably would have spent big this offseason. Langford crushes a ball, deep left field, gone. That one was smacked over the Angels bullpen. Fulmer looks completely exhausted. I don't know why they didn't pull him already. 2-run home run, Wyatt Langford. The Rangers lead it 9-3. The Rangers look like they're going to climb to within 5.5 of the Mariners for the AL West crown. So, Rangers starting to get a little better. Power starting to play a little bit now for Langford. That's his 5th home run of the season, I believe. And like I was just mentioning, the Rangers, if they add here at the deadline, which I think they will try to do, might do a little bit of buying and selling, using the depth that they have in that starting rotation, spin off a piece or two like a Dunning or somebody like a Bradford, somebody who they don't really value long-term wise anyway for this rotation, and try to get some impact pieces for their bullpen or another, lineup addition. So I think bullpen is probably where they look to add more than anything else this offseason. There's a lot of guys out there that are going to be available, there always is anyway, but we shall see. What about Holderman from Pittsburgh? Haven't seen his name much in trade rumors. He's cheap and has great stuff. I've actually heard his name once or twice. Once was actually connected to the Texas Rangers when the Rangers reached out this offseason when they were inquiring about Bednar. There was some thought that maybe you could get a package deal, and obviously the Pirates decided they were going to try to contend at the beginning of the year, making the one-year additions that they did, try to get a little bit more veteran-heavy like the Royals did as well. They did improve, just like the Royals did improve, but I think they realized they aren't a championship team yet, and that they need to spin off some of those pieces. I don't think the Pirates are going to move on from him, though. A player that could make some sense, that's on a relatively cheap contract, that maybe they could afford because of the talent that they have, would be a guy like Mason Miller from the Oakland A's. Low-cost salary, great stuff. Can he pitch in a postseason game for you? Remains to be seen, but the stuff really does play. So that could be a piece I see the Rangers going for. Let's check out some of these ideas that other teams have come up with. Michael Lorenzen, I think he could actually be available at the deadline. if the Rangers buy or sell, primarily because I think Lorenzen could be the number 5 starter, or he could be a long reliever out of the bullpen. But I think he's probably got more value as a trade asset right now to bring in whatever they want to bring in at the deadline. And then let Jose Urena, who's already been great in that long relief role for the Rangers this year, keep that role. And then maybe one of those other starters that they have in that rotation, like a John Gray, also find their way back into that bullpen. And they still have left Carson Fulmer in there. My goodness, they're just leaving him twisting on the vine right now. I get you're trying to get him through the inning, but my goodness. I've heard the A's want to move Miller back to the rotation at some point, so they likely value him as a starter. I've heard that as well. I've heard that the A's, they like his stuff and they want to see more than anything else if it's really going to work there. Do I think it will? No. I think they're just going to harm one of their best assets. Wash gives Fulmer a pat on the back, says, hey, thanks for trying to get us through these innings. Had to leave you out here a little too long, blah, blah, blah. 9-3 Rangers, top of the 7, 2 outs. But back to our Mason Miller discussion. Probably the best reliever that could be moved at the deadline as far as pure stuff. I think the A's probably should trade him. The question is, do they want to hold on to him and just, see what they have, see if he's a part of the next contending team for the Oakland A's? Do they want to see if he can become a starter? That's the issue that the Rangers might run into, or any other team, that they might be able to, might not be able to convince the A's to, move off of him because of how cheap his contract is, how much that the A's have invested in him and could continue to invest in him now that he's proven to be a successful piece at the major league level. Duran was the one piece I was thinking of as could be the trade asset going out as far as a position player group to add somebody to that bullpen. Giolito's injured. That doesn't make sense. Don't just ignore some of these trades. They just don't make any sense at all. Trying to see a reliever trade that makes some sense here before we go make our own. Crochet, no. Holiday, no. None of these deals look like they're making any sense. I'm probably just going to go ahead and make a trade here for you guys. Nothing here looks good. I'm going to go ahead and make a trade for you guys. Alright, so go ahead and put the Rangers in here first. We've talked about Mason Miller already. We talked a little bit about Scott. We haven't found a team for him yet. I think the Rangers would really like to add a setup guy more than anything else with maybe some closer experience. Guys who could kind of fit that role, who could even step in as the closer, would be a guy like David Bednar, who I mentioned a few times now. Who's the guy for Chicago? Was it Neris that we just traded? That's another one that could fit the bill. Looking at the standings here, Romano's injured. You're not really going to move him. Fairbanks probably could be a piece that's available for the Rays. Great stuff. Rangers had him at one point and traded him at one point anyway. Could be another team there. Estevez from the Angels makes some sense. Pilar from the Angels also makes some sense. Could be a fit. Former Rangers assistant GM Perry Manassian is the GM there currently. Might work, but it is still within the division. Diaz from the Mets, I don't know about that. Scott from the Marlins, Finnegan from the Nationals, Diaz from the Reds, Chapman from the Pirates, Doval from the Giants. Really don't see anything like that happening. So let's go ahead and go back to our trade here. Let's go ahead and stick with the Angels. We're going to go with the Major League level. There we go. Okay. Renhefo could be a difference maker as far as a bat, but we're looking for relievers. So, all right, 2.8 expiring deal, low cost option to kind of add here at the deadline. Pilar would love to play for a championship. This would probably be the move to replace Travis Jankowski. Jason Adam, that would be a nice one. We're going to go with the Rays, actually. I like the Rays idea here. Okay. Springs has had his name mentioned as a starter who could be available. We just traded Eflin. Pete Fairbanks is probably the reliever here that the Rangers would hope to get their hands on. Adam would be another piece here that could help out with that relief core. I'm not sure if he moves the needle enough for them to acquire him and take up a roster spot. Otherwise, I'd probably put him in there. Let's look at the relievers overall. Maton would be the other piece who's pitched in this division before. Low cost option. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on Phil Maton. He might have some bad blood with the Rangers staff, primarily because of the hits batsman that we saw earlier this year. Cost a couple of guys some time for the Rangers. Also, with his being on the Astros, hits batsman in that series as well. I'm just not sure he'd be a good fit into the clubhouse. Let's just leave it at Fairbanks for now. Obviously, the Rays would love to get something back of some legitimate value. Maybe a guy like Bradford would be a good fit, or a guy like Leiter. A trade of Leiter and Duran for Fairbanks might be a legitimate deal. Let's look at Scott's value real quick as well. Nardi, 4.5 years left to control. Scott, a free agent at the end of the year. Low cost salary too. This one has Rangers written all over it. Let's go ahead and do Tanner Scott because of the value here. Rangers would only have to give up one piece, and I think they've actually talked about this player before, that being Ezekiel Duran. Now, remember we did that Jake Burger trade earlier going to the Yankees? This would be the Jake Burger replacement in Ezekiel Duran. Long-term bat, I think he'd be a great fit there. Basically, for a half year of a reliever, I think the price is a little rich for the Rangers. So they may want some other pieces back in this deal, or try to expand it to a bigger trade overall. In fact, let's just see what could actually be there if they decided to go that route. You're not going to get Perez. You don't want Chisholm. Sanchez, Weathers. Nardi's probably the best reliever. Maybe you could expand the deal to include that. There was some thought that Edward Cabrera could be the other piece that the Rangers would be interested in as well. Let's just say the Rangers did that and finally went through with Cabrera. What could they turn around and give up? Maybe a guy like Foscue, who's kind of blocked at the major league level by Simeon. Maybe you throw in another starter here just for good measure at the lower levels. Or maybe an aged out catcher. I think this deal would work great for both teams. I'm going to go ahead and post this one just so you guys can kind of see it. Ah. Okay. So this trade here, I don't like it as much as the last one we did. That Astros one was just a beautiful trade. But overall, this one's not bad. You get 5 older, controllable players that by the time they hit free agency are going to be into their 30s. That's right around the one big contract type of thing. You have at least 4 years of control after this year with every single one of those players if you're the Marlins. That's your selling point. You also say, hey, we're dealing from our bullpen or reliever. We're also dealing from the back end of our rotation, a starter. And we still have our 1 and 2 coming back next year in Perez and Alcantara. We still have all these other pieces as well in our starting staff. And we've also added 2 premium hitting prospects anyway, or at least at one time were premium hitting prospects in Duran and Foscue. You give Foscue everyday second base chores when he's healthy, or when he finally gets back from the injured list, which sounds like it could be any day. You let Huff hit at the major league level instead of being stuck at AAA like he has been. Let him develop at the major league level the rest of this year and see what you got. He's kind of the throw-in at the back end of this deal because they really could use the roster spot to be freed up. And then Ezekiel Duran. I think the Rangers really would like to hold on to him as kind of their long-term first base option if Nathaniel Lowe starts to falter once again. But you got to give to get. And this type of a deal, they get a long-term starter, not necessarily an ace, but maybe a 3 or a 4 best-case scenario. And then you get Tanner Scott, probably one of the best closers, relief pitchers that's available here at the deadline. And you didn't even trade from your starters that you could still add some pieces back to this farm system to replenish it, younger pieces rather than Duran, Huff, and Foscue. Now, I love all 3 of those pieces. Big fan of Sam Huff, of his power. Just really has never been given a chance with the Rangers on the big league club. I was a huge fan of Justin Foscue, bat-to-ball skills when he was drafted as a second baseman. Was second to no one. And since they signed Marcus Semien a few years ago, he knew the writing was on the wall that he was going to be traded at some point, and his production dipped at the time of the acquisition of Marcus Semien, but he still looks like the same hitter we've seen before. He just needs, some type of a goal, somewhere he can play to try to elevate his game. I think he was really limited in that last year. Ooh, base hit up the middle. Oh, they cut it down. That looked like it could have been out. Instead, Moniak scores. It's now 9-4, Texas in the bottom of the 7th. Rangers give back one of those runs. Do you think Langford wins Rookie of the Year? I don't think so, primarily because of how he started off. I think the kid from the Orioles probably has a better chance. But I really like Langford as a player. I think if he had gotten off to at least a decent start, not necessarily as poor as he had originally started, I think we'd really be talking about something. But I think he's still probably going to finish the best out of all the rookies this year. But I think it's just a little too late. I think everybody in their mind gets their mind focused on a couple of guys at the beginning of the year and then forgets about everybody else, no matter what the preseason betting odds were as far as him and Carter. But I really like this trade. Not necessarily as much of the Houston and Rays trade, but I really like this one for both Texas and the Marlins. Alrighty, let's go on. Just kind of want to wrap up some news from around Major League Baseball. We'll do the National League side tomorrow. I don't know if Cowser can hold off Langford if he keeps hitting like this. A lot of Cowser's value is just power and defense. Sure, speed for Langford is something to keep an eye on as well. He is quite a fast player. Robertson getting loose for the Rangers here in the 7th. You'd like to be able to get through the 7th without having to use him. He had a cycle, yes. Langford almost hit for the cycle the other day. But anyway, some news from around Major League Baseball. We already talked about the Savali thing last week, as well as Estevez. Oh, that's strike 3. Oof. That one was all the way in the strike zone and got called a ball. Anyway, but appreciate you guys joining us. We mentioned that Brooks Lee was promoted by the Twins last week anyway. He played third base today for them as they try to find him at bats at the major league level. He's kind of filling in there for Royce Lewis, at least for now. D-backs going to beat the Braves. Well, they need to start putting together some victories before the All-Star break, in my mind, to convince upper management not to just stand pat, but to sell or to buy at the deadline. Walk here by Urena as he loses him. Mm, mm, mm. Looks like you're probably going to bring in Robertson right here, if I had to guess. Yep, Bochy coming out of the dugout. Bases loaded. Bottom of the seventh, 9-4. They're going to go get Robertson here. Is it Drury that's next? Erod still hasn't even pitched. Had some bad luck with those free agent signings. Monty has been terrible. Yeah, I would agree there. That's why I think that they could do a little bit of buying and selling at the deadline, try to get off of the money for Montgomery next year by eating the money this year and just saying, hey, take him and be gone. Save our money for next year. Erod, I think, still has a chance to be productive here. We'll see how he comes out of this injury. They'll have a couple of starts for him at the major league level before the deadline, and then he'll kind of be their trade deadline acquisition for that rotation. They've gotten some really nice performances out of the pieces that they brought up from the minors this year. They really struggled finding consistency from those guys last year. They've found it this year. Braves just tied it in the ninth. They are the Braves. Alrighty. But just to kind of recap, we went over the buyers here in both the American League and National League, who those guys are going to be. We'll go over the National League buyers as to who they might be targeting at the deadline this year. All-Star game coming up in about a week. Should be a decent game. We'll try to do a All-Star Live for you guys as well during the game. Just kind of talk some trade deadline during the game. Nobody really watches the game for the outcome anymore. That's the sad part of the All-Star game. They really need to figure out a way to make it a more watchable game. So if you guys want to join us on the All-Star edition of MLB Hot Stove Daily, we will be here for you. Again, tomorrow night, we'll start around the same time, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. We'll go over the National League buyers and just see where we are at there. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight, and y'all have a great evening. We'll see you guys tomorrow.